Hi, I'm Dr. Jenny Judge. I am a member of the British Society of Ecological Medicine. I have a special interest in treating people who've been affected by mould in their homes. One of the fascinating things about mould is there's a sort of a whole set of ways it can affect us. So we can get issues with the mould spores themselves, which can be allergenic. So we can get classic allergy symptoms. Mold spores fragment, and we get these tiny particles that can get right through into the respiratory tract. And these are very inflammatory. So we can get inflammatory conditions from the spore fragments. Mold makes volatile chemicals as it metabolizes and grows. And mold can also make a whole set of other chemicals which are made to defend itself when it feels threatened. And these can be very toxic to the body and can start to overwhelm the capacity at which we can process and get these things out. Particularly, for example, if we're already using eosine-based cleaners and we have formaldehyde in our furniture and we're not letting new air in, etc., we're just very full already. And I think that's another issue that's increasing people's problems with mould in their house. The bucket's full. So adding mould on top becomes a much bigger issue than if mould was the only contaminant. The level at which having mould in your house is going to make people sick is really, really individual. So some people have a genetic vulnerability. They just don't process it as quickly as others. So they're going to be affected earlier. Some people have pre-existing burdens on their detox systems, on their immune systems. So they're already in a position where adding mould into the picture is going to affect their health more quickly than others. So it's a health risk for everybody, I would say. Some people are going to show the health effects earlier than others. Obviously, children, particularly young children, are much more quickly affected than adults. They have a bigger surface area to volume. So, anything airborne, anything environmental, it has a more concentrated impact on them. They absorb it more quickly. So children more than adults. My patient group, I tend not to see the asthma people. I do see a lot of people who have a history of allergy, and what you see often in the early stages of mould exposure is a real explosion in their reactivity to all kinds of non-mould things. So people might start reacting to food, might start reacting to chemicals. So they're walking down the supermarket aisle with all the air fresheners, etc., and that suddenly becomes overwhelming. What was a simple pollen allergy for maybe 2 or 3 months now seems to be allergic symptoms that are right through the year. So this feels like the kind of first step of immune system hypervigilance that people get. One of the tricky things with mould is a great mimic. So, it might affect one person with a very clear gut profile. They'll get difficulty digesting food, they will be belching after meals, they'll have diarrhea, etc. Somebody else might start getting muscle aches and pains and feeling fatigued. Somebody else might have asthma or allergy type symptoms. So it's really difficult to sort of say this looks like a mold profile. So I think particularly if there's several people in a household who are getting progressively more unwell, but in different ways, that to me is a strong hint that, let's have a think about whether there's been a water leak. Could there be some mold growing in the house? Might this be one of the things that's triggering everyone's health issues? Mold is everywhere. There are mold spores in every breath we breathe. They're all over the place. So that's not necessarily the problem. The problem is when the environment within the home becomes very attractive for mold growth. And this can be somewhere where there was a water leak, perhaps from an upstairs bathroom down a wall below. And what you can get is an area between the floors that doesn't dry out. And that can become populated with mold. So there's nothing to see, there's nothing to smell, but there is a biological system growing in your house that is emitting chemicals, metabolites, spores, fragments, inflammatory triggers that eventually over time start to overwhelm your body's ability to keep up and you start to get symptoms. It's useful to know what the humidity in your house is. And you can buy hygrometers for £2-3. And these will give you a sense of whether you have lots of humid hotspots in your house. And if you have, that is probably something that should be addressed. Your houses should breathe. They shouldn't be humid inside. And if they are, they're more at risk of having mold growth. You can do a visual of your house. Are your gutters draining? Are your, is there any water dripping down the wall? There's all kinds of quite simple visual things you can do that people, as I said, aren't aware could potentially be a problem to the ecology of the house. That once you know that they're potentially an issue, are reasonably easy to fix. Drying clothes indoors can up the humidity. Using bathrooms, particularly if they're not vented, can up the humidity. So if you're drying clothes indoors, use a room that you close off, open the window if you can, just try and keep that localised and keep an eye on the humidity there and in the rest of the house. There's a sense that, mould is natural and it's always been there. So how can it be a problem and, why is it suddenly a problem now? And I think my best take on that is that there's several things. Firstly, we've hugely changed how we build our houses. And we use a lot more materials now in our houses that support mould growth. So we are getting more mould in houses because we use things like MDF and other pre-manufactured materials. They're just easier for mould to live in than a solid piece of wood. The other thing, we have a lot more plumbing in our houses. So I would, maybe 150 years ago, you would not have had complex plumbing on every floor in the house with hidden pipework. And these pipes can spring a tiny leak, nothing to see, as I said before, but a persisting small leak between one floor and another can become a hotspot for mould growth. So we've got a lot more water running through our houses. We've got different building materials in our houses. And then we have had a real drive for energy efficiency, so our houses breathe less. I think people being affected by mould is hugely common. I think if it is a factor in somebody's overall health, it is addressable and it's not necessarily hugely complicated. And I think that's really satisfying for me as a clinician, and particularly if people were able to see it, to address it early. So people know about the risks in the home. They know to fix water leaks. They know not to just paint over something that was wet, but to cut off a porous material, replace it. We can massively prevent people having problems. Lots of people come to see me. They've already seen lots of people having had various tests done, lots of great interventions, and they haven't got better. And these are the people that I really think, okay, we need to look at your environment if it's not been looked at. And the more complex somebody is, the more symptoms they have, and the more treatment they've had without getting better, the more sure I am that there's mould in their house, and that's the root cause. I'm happy to see people as early as they, when they make that link, because with all treatments, the earlier you can start the process of addressing the root cause and then helping the body recover, then the quicker usually people can get better.